Well, before the break, I spoke about the phrase defund the police. Joining me now for more on that, and by the way, this is the beautiful city of Portland you're looking at. Joining me now for more on that is Portland, Oregon City Commissioner Joanne Hardisty. She was the first black woman to sit on Portland City Council. Also joining me is Brittany Packnett-Cunningham, the founder of Love and Power Works, an MSNBC contributor, the host of the podcast Undistracted, and an expert on policing as well. But thank you to both of you. Good morning to both of you. Joanne, let me start with you, because part of what this thing has come down to is people who embrace the phrase defund the police are accused of being people who want to eliminate the police, abolitionists of police. You believe that that's inaccurate?
It is absolutely inaccurate. There's a big difference between redirecting public resources to totally eliminating police. And I'm old enough to not believe that abolition will happen in my lifetime. But what I know is that based on outcomes, policing, the way we do it today, does not work. It does not solve crime. It does not prevent crime. And what it does is actually exacerbate a lot of social ills in our community.
Brittany, let's talk about this. What does success look like? You've studied this issue well. What should happen? We've been pushing more and more public money into policing, largely because as security issues become bigger things, we think that the way to solve them is policing, when in fact, in many cases, it was mental health or substance abuse counseling or domestic violence issues. How do we solve this, Brittany?
You know, when activists use phrases like divest or defund the police, we're ultimately talking about re-envisioning public safety. We're not talking about, as I've said so often, Gotham without Batman. We're talking about actually building strong communities from the ground up. And frankly, this conversation, in my opinion, isn't about language at all. It's about action. So very simply, the conversation has expanded. And no matter how you describe it, at the very least, Americans have declared what they want the outcomes to be and are largely in favor of alternatives to policing and incarceration. So these are important numbers, Allie. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, there is broad support for these alternatives. Nearly 80% of people surveyed want 911 to be directed to mental health services and substance abuse support. Nearly 60% of people believe policing funds should actually be shifted to those community organizations that, again, make things healthy from the ground up. This is a fascinating number that I think a lot of people miss, but even an overwhelming majority of the victims of violent crime want to see us invest our money in community organizations, in things like education and mental health, instead of prisons and jails. So we've talked a lot about what we say, but our question should always be, what are we going to do? And just as you said, Allie, there are a lot of folks who want to make sure that what we do is actually invest in the things that heal us and remove the money from the things that hurt us.
So, Commissioner Hardisty, that's actually what you want to do in Portland, right? That was the whole point here about cutting about $15 million out of the police budget. So for people who thought that you wanted to, cancel the ability of police's ability to respond to 911 calls, your point is that the budget was $240 million to start with. You're asking for $15 million to be redirected to do something that might be more efficient, particularly for segments of the society who need other help other than armed police showing up to deal with the matter.
No question. And in fact, I got $15 million cut out of the budget earlier this year. And that money is being redirected into programs that serve our houseless population and the creation of a program called Portland Street Response, which will send a 3-person team to respond to 911 calls where there's no weapons involved, there's no violence involved. Because, I managed the 911 call center in Portland, and the biggest increase over the last 5 years in calls to 911 are for unwanted people. Sending an armed response for unwanted people has proven to be deadly for some folks. So what do you mean when you say unwanted? It could be someone who looks disheveled, someone who is suffering from a mental health issue, or someone who, quite frankly, just doesn't have a safe, affordable place to lay their head at night. And so when we send people with weapons and people with aggressive interventions, what we end up with is more community violence. The community wants responses like Portland Street Response, which will send a qualified mental health professional, a EMT, and a peer supporter, a 3-person team to go out and help people be as safe as they can be where they are. Our big problem is we don't have mental health treatment when people need it. We don't have housing people can afford to live in. We don't have enough living wage jobs that people can take care of their families. And so the outcome of that is we have an explosion of houseless people. Well, bringing the police into that mix makes no sense, right? Because so what do? We arrest them. So now they have a criminal conviction and they really can't get housing, right? They really can't get employment that will support their family. And that has been, that's the problem, because that's been the conversation. I think a lot of people are fearful with the term defund because what they want to know is what's going to replace it. And the reality is that we can't think of it as a one-for-one exchange. We have to acknowledge that we have squandered hundreds of millions of dollars into a public safety system that does not keep us safe. That's why one of my initiatives is rethink community safety. Community safety looks different based on the color of your skin, your socioeconomic status. And so that's the conversation we have to have, right? And then we say, and what role does police play in that, right? Because we will still have crimes that police must solve, right? And that's where they should be focusing their energy and their resources.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.